shadows over Blackthorn Manor. England, 1501. The walls of Blackthorn Manor were old, overgrown with ivy and surrounded by the darkness of the surrounding woods. It was a place where stories of ghosts and lost souls were as deeply rooted as the gnarled roots of the trees that surrounded the estate. For Mary, however, it was a sanctuary. Mary was the daughter of an impoverished landowner whose family had been unable to offer her a place in the world. So she had begun her days as a maid, cleaning the dark corridors of Blackthorn Manor and doing the bidding of her mistress, the cranky and often cruel Lady Eleanor. But in the long nights, when the cold crept through the walls, she sensed that something lurked in these halls. It began in the library, a room that everyone avoided. The old manuscripts and books were long forgotten. Dust and cobwebs had taken hold of them. Mary loved this room. She found a peace there that made the hard days easier. But one evening, while she was looking at a particularly old book with strange symbols, she heard footsteps behind her. "You're looking for answers you'd better not find." The voice was deep, dark, and had a strange accent that made the hairs on the back of Mary's neck stand up. She wheeled around, and there he stood, a man with snow-white hair that shimmered like moonlight in the darkness. His clothes were simple, almost timeless, but that wasn't what took Mary's breath away. It was his eyes, bright silver and with a depth that seemed like an abyss. "Who are you?" Her voice trembled. "Adrian," he replied, and his smile was soft, almost sad. "I am a friend of this house. I've never seen you here before." "That's understandable." He stepped closer, and Mary felt the air between them grow colder. "Most people don't see me, but you're different." Mary took a step back. She wanted to flee, but something about him held her fast. His presence was overwhelming, a mixture of danger and an eerie allure. "What do you want from me?" she finally whispered. Adrian scrutinized her, his eyes seeming to look into her as if he could see her innermost being. "I want you to be careful, Mary. This house holds secrets that aren't meant for you." He turned as if to leave, but Mary's voice stopped him. "Wait." He paused, looking at her over his shoulder. "Why should I believe you? Who are you really?" Adrian smiled, a smile that raised more questions than it answered. "You'll find out, but not today." And with those words he was gone. No door had opened. No sound had accompanied his departure. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. The days passed, but Mary couldn't forget Adrian. She began to see him in the corridors, always just for a fleeting moment, always when no one else was around. He didn't speak to her, but his eyes always sought hers, like a silent promise. One night, as the storm raged across the estate and the wind whistled through the cracks in the windows, Mary heard footsteps outside her room. She opened the door, and there he stood. "Come with me," he said softly, and this time there was no question in his voice. Although her senses warned her to avoid him, Mary followed him. He led her down into the catacombs beneath the manor house, a place she had never been before. The air was cold and heavy, the torches on the walls casting trembling shadows. Adrian walked ahead of her, his white hair shining like a beacon in the darkness. "Why am I here?" she asked, her voice echoing off the stone walls. Adrian stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. "Because you deserve the truth." He opened the door, and Mary's breath caught. The room beyond was filled with a strange, silvery light. In the center of the room stood a mirror, tall and framed in gold, looking strangely untouched by time. But it wasn't the mirror itself that frightened Mary. It was what she saw in it. She was in the mirror, but she was not alone. Adrian was standing behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder, but his face had changed. His eyes, which usually shone like silver, were dark red, and his teeth, they were pointed, predatory teeth. Mary whirled around, but Adrian was the same as before. No sign of the monster she had seen in the mirror. "What? What are you?" she stammered. "I'm what's warning you," he said quietly. "This house, it's cursed, Mary. Lady Eleanor has made a pact, one that has imbued this land, these walls, with darkness, and now you are a part of it." "Why me?" she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "Because she chose you," Adrian replied, his gaze softening, almost gentle. "But I can save you, if you want me to." "How?" "Give me your trust. Let me guide you." His words were a temptation, a melody that made Mary's heart beat faster. She felt a strange warmth flood through her as Adrian stepped closer, his fingers lightly brushing her cheek. "You have to decide," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Will you stay here and become a part of this curse? Or will you follow me and trust me with your life?" Mary's thoughts whirled, but there was a strange truth in his gaze, a certainty she hadn't found anywhere else. Finally she nodded. Adrian's lips curled into a smile that expressed both triumph and regret. "Come on then, Mary. There's no way back." He reached for her hand, and the world around them blurred. The mirror shattered. The darkness engulfed everything. And Mary disappeared into the night with Adrian, while the storm raged outside. Blackthorn Manor and its new maid were never to be heard of again. But the stories of a man with snow-white hair and silver eyes lived on in the whispers of the forest.